Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Resilient Professional Podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we're going to talk about the ability to marshal your powers of concentration and focusing. Absolutely important traits when it comes to professional resilience and the ability to get things done. We're drawing from ideas found in the book, The Practicing Mind. You'll enjoy this edition of the Resilient Professional Podcast. Welcome to the Resilient Professional Podcast. Professional success really is a game of inches. You have the experience and knowledge, but you realize that professional success is more than just knowledge and experience. It's actually applying what you already know. It's about consistently applying what you know in spite of the challenges that are sure to come your way. You know, Olympians know how to battle adversity and to perform at their best, even in the midst of setbacks and frustrations. I think we can learn a lot from the Olympian mindset. It really is about the cultivation of resiliency. Physical resiliency, emotional resiliency, relational resiliency, cognitive resiliency, resiliency in each aspect of our lives. On a regular basis, we'll unpack these ideas through guest speakers and podcast material that will take you to the next level of professional success. Hi everyone, Sean here. What I wanted to do today is talk about some information that I thought was really relevant to being a resilient professional as it relates to marshaling our focusing abilities, our ability to be mindful around the important tasks that we do every day. And so the ideas come from a book called The Practicing Mind, which was written by Thomas Steiner. And what I wanted to do is just share some of the main concepts that he put forth in this book. And I'll share a few ideas today, but over the next several weeks, I'll come back to The Practicing Mind and share some other little ideas, kernels of wisdom that Thomas Steiner shares in this book. The first thing he talks about is if it's worth achieving whatever goal you have, it'll take practice. In fact, life really is one long series of practice, and refinement. And often, unfortunately, we default to the notion that, doing lots of practicing is specific to things like music or various forms of the arts or sports, when in fact practicing and really engaging in that process is relevant to almost every area of life. I mean, whether it's budgeting or dealing with a cranky child, a moody teenager, improving your marriage. Really all those things benefit greatly from diligent and intentional practice. And he talks about his experience learning to golf. He found golf to be very instructive around this whole notion of practicing and refining our abilities. And he said the things that he learned in golf, he could take into other areas of his life and become just that much better. So one of the things that he observed, even before he started playing golf, is that he knew people who had been golfing for many years, literally decades, and they seemed to be stuck in a rut. No matter how much they practiced or played, they seemed to have plateaued and never really improved. And he thought to himself, how is that possible? I mean, what's actually going on there? So when he started playing golf, one of the first things he decided to do was to hire a golf pro. So to his credit, he had enough humility to understand that there was great utility, great value in hiring a coach to get him started on the right foot with the right sort of technique and knowing the essentials that he needed to master to get better at golf. Now, the other thing he realized is that he knew that he would have to stay very consistent with his practicing, and he had to make dedicated effort. It couldn't be a sloppy kind of inconsistent approach. So he was going to be very disciplined and apply regular routines to developing his golf game. And he knew that that would require not just consistency on getting on the driving range or practicing his putting or working with a pro, but he'd have to do some homework to improve his knowledge around golf. And he also recognized right at the beginning from past experiences that failure was a really good teacher. So he knew that it would be very easy to get bogged down if things got frustrating or experienced failure, and that I noticed a lot of people just kind of quit once they experienced a little bit too much failure. He made a cognitive decision right at the beginning that failure was in fact a good teacher, and that he would not use that as a way of just grinding down to the point where he wouldn't do it anymore. He would welcome failure as something that would instruct him to get better. And so he really reframed it in his mind. That was very constructive way of looking at it. And he realized that golf taught the proper mechanics of practicing, which really are, basically picking a goal and applying steady effort towards that goal until you achieve it. And so it's about not just having the goal, but having a consistent, dedicated process for achieving the goal. So the first step that he recognized in this whole process was your internal drive or interest or motivation. What's getting you involved in this whole process to begin with? But that's just the start, right? Whatever the driver is, he said, and we all have experienced this, right, that it only lasts so long. And without a process attached to the driver motivation, again, you could pretty quickly stop moving in the direction of those goals. And so first comes drive, internal motivation, what's moving in the direction of this goal, and then secondly, attach a process that will help you to keep moving towards that goal, whether or not you emotionally feel like doing it. So he sort of talked in the terms of it's about self-awareness and self-discipline and patience. So I think those three things are really important: self-awareness and self-discipline, and then ongoing patience. This is not necessarily going to happen overnight. It's going to maybe take a bit of dedication over a period of time to achieve your goals. And a great example of this whole notion of the initial enthusiasm is New Year's resolutions and goals for losing weight and getting fitter. And we all know what happens in fitness clubs at the beginning of the year, right? They're really busy, and then there's a massive drop-off because people haven't really connected that initial enthusiasm to an ongoing process that's going to keep them engaged in moving towards their goals. And so he also said against this backdrop is the reality that we truly live in this world that embraces multitasking and speed and distraction. And we can fool ourselves into believing that we're being effective by engaging, going quickly and trying to do things quickly, when in fact it often leads to less effectiveness. That our effectiveness is eroded when we try to hurry things. So he embedded into this whole process of becoming more effective almost a less hurried kind of approach to things. He actually slowed his life down, and he found that when he became more reflective, more mindful, more intentional around the activities that he actually was working on in that moment, even though he intentionally tried to slow things down, he actually found that he was able to get more done when he took that approach than the approach where he would try to multitask or speed up and have his day full of distractions. Now, there's no doubt that there are times when we do need to multitask. That's the reality of our life. But unfortunately, it's so common. It's one of those things that we just kind of default to subconsciously. And so what he says is that we need to really marshal our powers of concentration and focus so that we can really put our attention to what we need to pay attention to in that moment. If we do that, we can sort of push that anxiety and agitation away. If we don't, we'll become easily worn out and distracted if we're always going from one thing to another and we're agitated and we're multitasking or rushing. That's not a really productive way of getting through our days. So the goal behind the Practicing Mind, at least his basic thesis, is that we want to make sure that we develop skills to help marshal our ability to focus our concentration in the moment, to be in the moment and use that ability to focus on the task at hand. The other thing he says is often we serve our thoughts instead of our thoughts serving us. And what he says is we need to start becoming aware of our thoughts. We become duped by our technology, and we seem to believe that technology is our salvation, and that we should embrace technology to try to be more efficient and get more done. And I think there's obviously a validity to that, but I think we've all had experiences when we sometimes wonder whether technology really has made us more efficient. Just try to use voicemail. So I'm sounding very old-fashioned when I say that, but I think we all kind of get that sometimes technology actually gets in the way of being effective. We need to really push against this notion that just because we have amazing technology that people at 2,500 years ago didn't have, that we're somehow superior to those people. And yet, ironically, those people had the time to be much more self-aware, much more inner-directed, much more aware of their interior world and thoughts, and had a better ability to focus and to be attentive, to be patient, and to be disciplined. In many ways, the technology that surrounds us has led to what some commentators say sort of the age of distraction. And what Steiner's putting forth in this book is, the antithesis of that. What can we do to fight these distracting technologies? And the way that we think sometimes gets in the way of that as well. So Steiner puts forward the idea that if you're not in control of your thoughts, you're not likely in control of your life. He really puts it that direct. And the more aware you are of your thoughts, the more in control of your life you'll be. And really it's the first step in what he refers to as self-awareness. So one of the goals of the book is to assist people to deal with a common experience. And that is, we get excited about a new goal or project, then the enthusiasm starts to wane and decline, and then we become a little less consistent with those regular disciplines to achieve those goals, and then we begin to just kind of confront inertia, and we just lose steam as we go towards those goals. They were really exciting, but now we're just kind of grinding it down. And then eventually there's this nagging feeling that we're letting ourselves down, that we're not fulfilling and following through in our personal commitments, and then our integrity and our self-esteem can take a hit. So it's a really lousy cycle. And so the whole idea around the principles he's beginning to espouse here is to stay out of that cycle, so that we can keep the momentum going and not get bogged down by some of the short-term negativity that can come into our world very easily as we're trying to go for some goals and objectives. The reality is, as soon as you want to make a change in our lives and improve things and try to accomplish things, you will have to fight inertia. So you need to have a frame of reference, a point of view, a system, a process to get through those difficult times. And so he asks us in the book to reflect on how we can learn and develop mastery, so that anything that we've done in the past, is a really good exercise to go back in our past, think about the things that you've actually have mastered, that you've done well, and more often than not, you'll find that you mastered those things because you had some regular rituals or habits that you were engaged in on a regular basis, and you had ongoing drive and consistency, internal motivation to keep doing those things. So what will take you in the direction of your objectives? Do a bit of an inventory. What are some key objectives you have right now? Take a look at those things. Do you actually have a structure, a system, a process to help you accomplish those things? And then do you have a process to sort of stay focused and really present? Or are you multitasking all the time? Are you hurrying all the time? Are you instead, taking some dedicated time? If you've got some important projects, make sure you're blocking time off in your calendar, that you're working away with a single focus, a purpose. Don't let those distractions come in. That's the only way that you can really get those things accomplished. So the narrative really is about developing the ability to get lost in the process of doing something important. And that's about being mindful and about focused. So I think those are some basic ideas that are really helpful. And I think that as you look at your own professional life, there's probably ways that you can improve them by, again, doing the following.
Okay, what are some of the main takeaways from this podcast? Well, when it comes to accomplishing important goals or objectives, we need to tap into mission, passion, excitement. Those are really necessary emotions to kind of fuel initial change. The problem with that is that these emotions don't have a lot of staying power. So once we get moving down a certain path, we also need to build process or systems around the tasks necessary to achieve our goals. And they could be very simple things like, what day of the week do you need to work on this project? What's the environment? Do you go to your office? Do you go someplace else to work on it? Is there any technology or other resources you need to have at your fingertips when you're working on the project? So think about the practical systems or process you need to have in place to keep you moving in the direction of those goals. The next thing that the author did is he tapped into experts. So remember, he talked about golf. And in golfing, he hired a golf coach, and the golf coach was very instructive in getting him going in the right direction and could give him feedback about what he was doing right and what he was doing wrong. Now, we can do the same thing in our own lives around going to a seminar, a workshop, hiring a business coach. It could be reading. There's all kinds of resources around us, the internet, to improve our knowledge level to be more effective. He also talked about don't multitask. If you're working on these goals and objectives, clear the deck, clear the desk. Make sure you're dealing with one thing at a time and marshaling your powers of concentration. And don't hurry. Take your time. Rushing around creates anxiety. It's a waste of energy. And he talked about the irony that when he began slowing down and stopped doing as much multitasking, he actually got more done in the day, not less. So I think that's a really, really important point. He also talked about being self-reflective. In other words, sometimes the stuff rattling around our heads and our emotions drives our behavior or our ability to stick to a task. For most of us, that's not something we're often conscious of. As we become more conscious of the internal dialogue, it'll take time to begin a more positive dialogue and to push back some of the negative dialogue. So the basic challenge was begin a process of taking control of your thoughts and embrace productive thoughts so that will move you down the road towards your objectives. So being self-reflective and taking time to train yourself to be more productive in your internal world, your interior world. He also talked about to be present and do the best in the moment that you're in. So we talked about that a little bit. And that probably was one of the most important points. So here's the answer as to why those golfers never really improved. It's not just about going out and practicing. It's not just about going out and playing. It's about constantly refining your ability levels. So it's about getting knowledge, trying to apply that new knowledge to your current approach to things, and tweaking. And you've got to be very conscious. You will need to embed intentionally new habits, new skill sets on a regular basis. So the golfers that didn't improve, they were putting in time, but they were not initiating intentional practice. And that is a key difference. Getting knowledge, applying that new knowledge to your skill sets, and intentionally thinking about what you're doing to improve. It's really, really hard work. It's not something that we can do all the time, and we don't have the ability to do it, for long periods of time. It's very short, concentrated bursts of intentional practice that will make all the difference for you. So all the best as you pursue your professional goals. Hope you enjoyed this edition of the Resilient Professional Podcast. Be sure to go to our website to poke around a lot of other podcasts and resources and courses that you might find helpful as you pursue both professional and personal resiliency.